What's up, everybody? This is Grant at Cause Artist. Welcome to episode 228 of the Disruptors for Good podcast. In this episode, I'm joined by Jacqueline Novogratz, the founder and CEO of Acumen, a global organization redefining how we fight poverty and build dignity through patient capital and moral leadership. Since 2001, Acumen has impacted more than 650 million lives by investing in early-stage social enterprises across Africa, South Asia, Latin America, and the United States. Through Acumen Academy, they've also trained over 1,800 social enterprise leaders, driving systems levels change in their communities. Alongside its nonprofit work, Acumen now manages hundreds of millions of dollars in for-profit funds, investing at the intersection of poverty and climate to scale solutions in energy access, agriculture, education, and more. Before founding Acumen, Jacqueline's journey spanned international banking, co-founding Rwanda's first microfinance bank, and building leadership programs at the Rockefeller Foundation. She's the author of the bestsellers The Blue Sweater and Manifesto for a Moral Revolution, and has been recognized by Forbes, Foreign Policy, and the Daily Beast as one of the most influential thinkers and leaders. In this conversation, Jacqueline shares her incredible journey from launching the first microfinance bank in Rwanda to building new markets for the underserved, and offers powerful insight on moral imagination, long-term investing, and what it really takes to build a more just world. Hope you enjoyed the conversation. Let's dive in. Thank you so much, Jacqueline, for joining me today. This is a great honor, to be honest. I've been doing Cause Artists since 2013, and through that, Acumen has always been talked about, read about, followed its sort of organizational journey for a while, and of course, all the things you've done has inspired a lot of people, including me. So this is a great honor for me. So I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks so much, Grant. I'm really happy to be here.
Try to start from the beginning. Maybe you want to start around after college, maybe Chase Bank and sort of working in international banking, and maybe how that sort of set the stage for the life you had led and the impact you've had made in life. Do you want to start there, or even go before there?
I think that's a good place to start. That I was sort of an accidental banker that started to work at Chase Manhattan Bank, in part because it took me to 40 countries at a time when people didn't do a lot of traveling over 3 years. And it was a very different time from today. But where there was similarity is that the financial markets then as now overlooked and sometimes exploited the poor. And it was really that got me thinking about the power of business and yet its limitations if you don't intentionally go and structure finance to include people. And so I moved to Rwanda. I started the first microfinance bank in the country with a small group of Rwandan women, and saw the power of giving women access to markets. And I also learned there two other important lessons. One, that access isn't enough. If you don't have the capability to make use of that access, you also won't fully engage in ways that can fundamentally transform your lives and others. And two, that dignity was really important to the way that we thought about markets and the way that we thought about what it actually took for people to have agency over their own lives. And those two events punctuated with the Rwandan genocide, where I really saw how easy it is to manipulate people, prey on insecurity in times of great inequality, and make us do terrible things sometimes, all came together to say there's got to be a different way that is not between the markets and philanthropy or aid, but uses the best of the market and the humanitarian impulse behind charity and aid, and makes change. So Acumen was born from those experiences, based in this idea that, number one, entrepreneurs are the ones that are going to solve our toughest problems. They love the word impossible. They go after it. Number two, when an entrepreneur is trying to build a market that has never existed or to solve a tough problem of poverty, they have so many more hurdles and challenges than an entrepreneur in a more established functioning market, and certainly around capital markets, would have. And therefore, we could take philanthropy as supposedly the most risk-oriented capital that we have, and invest in entrepreneurs, sometimes for 10 or even 20 years, to give them the time to experiment, fail, learn how to price, build trust, ultimately, in some cases, build infrastructure, distribution, marketing. And now, almost 25 years later, 650 million people impacted. It's just so clear, Grant, that this is a missing element even today, especially with the end of aid, as how we can really make change at a fundamental and systemic level.
What were some of the successes that you saw when you and the team started the bank in Rwanda that maybe led to the idea of Acumen to say, hey, maybe we can sort of scale this idea?
Well, number one is that if you thought about microfinance not as the solution, but as one product or service that low-income people didn't have access to, that was the success. That when I got there, weeks before women had been given permission from the government to open bank accounts for the first time in history without their husband's signature. So we literally went from zero to mainstream very, very quickly, much more quickly than I would have imagined. And we did it through an institution that became an important influencer in the nation. So I learned very young that a small group of people could shift and shape market access. What I also saw was this idea of you can give people access to markets, but if they don't have the capability to take advantage of them, it's not enough. I had seen with microfinance, and it's the same today, that women they could increase their ability to participate in the economy, but they weren't creating jobs. They weren't moving out of poverty. And what was needed for that was to build businesses that employ people, and that most people want jobs. And so I started a bakery simultaneously. And while it was small, we still cornered the snack food market in the country. And I really got to see what it would take to make that happen, to teach these incredible women who were mostly illiterate and didn't have confidence how to sell and how to make sense of pricing, profit and loss were, and quality control, all that stuff. And this was not rocket science. And if we could put the two together, you could make real change. And so those were, for me, that was the aha moment. We needed to get, we were making peanut butter, but we couldn't find jars for our peanut butter. So I went to a honey factory to see if I could convince these guys. Now you have to remember there were like 12 businesses, there weren't a lot. And when I got there and I saw these workers, that was for me the aha moment. It was like, whoa, I need to figure out how we can solve problems in ways that create jobs and industries. That's the money play, if you will. And that was the decision. Go back to business school, learn how to do it. And now, we have invested in microfinance bank, but a very, very small number. What excites me is, all right, financial inclusions, that's not that hard. Getting electricity to people who've never had it in their lives, or building a chicken industry when none has ever existed, new healthcare systems, that requires fundamentally shifting how people think and behave. And it means really going against a status quo that does not want to change. And so I underestimated how hard it would be, and I underestimated how unbelievably fulfilling it would be when it worked, and that it does work. And that's been the most joyful part of the journey.
A couple of I love words, and I think it's important to kind of like when people like hit the right tones of words. And the one thing I think Acumen has done well, first of all, it's like really hard to just start a business, be an entrepreneur, and have that be successful. Is really, really difficult. You could be in a developed world or an emerging economy, doesn't matter. Really hard part is actually building markets. And that's a key word that comes up in sort of Acumen, building markets, creating markets. So then you can then have entrepreneurs to actually go out and build companies within those markets. But there's even a foundational level, before that entrepreneurship can even happen.
For sure.
For those who don't know, paint with as broad brush as you can on what Acumen is, what it does, and its sort of mission and vision.
High level. Acumen is a global nonprofit that does three things. We start actually with Acumen Academy because we believe in the power of individual entrepreneurs in the social sector. So both nonprofits and for-profits, we find extraordinary social entrepreneurs. We connect them, we train them, we support them, we make them a community because this work is so lonely. And we ensure that it's deliberately diverse so that they get to, these young leaders get to know each other across their nations, which are so divided and increasingly divisive.
Yeah.
Some of those go on to patient capital. And so the second thing Acumen does is what I was just describing. When we see an entrepreneur who has a fledgling business that specifically is solving a problem of poverty in energy, healthcare, education, agriculture, we will invest with the expectation that it will take a long time. We will accompany those entrepreneurs with our social capital, our networks, our access, our support with management, and we will measure what matters, both on the financial side and on the impact side. And when money comes back, it can be reinvested into other innovation for low-income people. Then there's another category. As you look across the spectrum of capital, we get growth. And I'll give you an example, Grant, but where then we've got over 300 million, almost 500 million of for-profit funds across at the nexus of climate and poverty, where we can lead larger rounds with more traditional investors who expect returns. And we feel safer because this is not that super early market creation kind of investment. Now you've got markets and you've got companies that can go to scale. So those three things are what Acumen does. And then the circularity of it is from all of that, we gain incredible insights about what works, what doesn't work, how to make people make decisions. How might we think even more creatively about putting nature on the balance sheet and accounting for the costs as well as the benefits of doing this work? And we can share that with the world because we are here not simply to build companies, but to build nations and truly change the way people think about low-income people and solve problems of poverty.
I want to go back to that word, building markets. How do you even start to do that? Is that on the ground working with the government first, working with the community and small business owners first? I guess talk about that ecosystem of actually creating a market, at a very foundational level from the ground up. Like you said, if you got no electricity, no running water, not the greatest infrastructure, there's a lot there to be done that obviously Acumen can't do it all. But what is it when you say building markets? What does that look like? Maybe there's an example you can get, but I mean, just from a foundational level, where do you even start?
Such a great question, and no one ever asks it. So I actually have never told this story, but I remember I'd left Wall Street, and I thought I was sort of fancy, and then I was suddenly in Rwanda, where there were very few tarmac roads, and there was hardly any electricity, and there was no telephone, and there was one radio station and no television. I was sort of like, whoa, okay. And now you have the temerity at age 25 of thinking, we're going to start a bank. And I remember the very first board meeting, and one of my Rwandan counterparts had broken her leg and she had just given birth. So she was still in her nightgown. And I was sitting in a living room with these women. Now, they were very powerful women. Two of them were parliamentarians. But I was looking around this living room and thinking, is this how it starts? That you're sitting in a living room with someone who's nursing her baby and sort of dressed in her pajamas, and we're dreaming? And the truth is, yes. That's how it starts. A few people come together, they have an outside dream, and they start thinking about what move can we make first. And then you move. Delight, which is just a remarkable example to me because we couldn't have imagined just how impactful it could be. Two guys at business school know that there's an opportunity because one of them has been a Peace Corps volunteer, and he sees his neighbor house burned down because up until 2006, 1.5 billion people in the world still used those hurricane lanterns that were used in the 19th century by pioneers to light their homes at night, and they belched, ugly, smelly, expensive smoke. And I remember walking around in Uttar Pradesh in India, with Sam Goldman, one of the co-founders, and he said, we both went to a fancy business school. Jacqueline, how do you price something for people who've never had access to solar light, who don't understand solar light, who don't trust solar light? And the only equivalent you have in terms of what already exists is the fact that they buy kerosene and pay about 50 cents a day.
Gotcha.
And we were just laughing because business school, we were taught maximize your price as much as you can. But the goal, one, we didn't even understand what that would look like. We couldn't sell anything to save our lives at that point because no one trusted it. And the goal was to maximize the number of people whose lives would change. What do you price it? And then what we didn't understand was, okay, so now you have a price. But even free at that point didn't always work because there was so little trust. And remember, they gave a woman a light for a month to try to build at least understanding. And at the end of the month, she loved the light. She was a samosa seller in a marketplace. And she sold more goods and she felt safe walking home. And they were like, well, do you want to buy it now? And they were, no. It's like, thank you very much. What if it breaks in a month? Good point. So you start playing around with the price. Then you have to figure out, how do you convince people who don't trust you? Then how do you get the goods to these rural markets that have no infrastructure? Then how do you finance it?
Yep.
If there's a microfinance bank around, maybe. But remember, people are paying every single day. If they don't have money on a particular day, they just go without light. But if you don't pay your loan, the bank could call the loan. So that remained a big point of friction. And then what we didn't understand, and now I understand it more than I ever wanted to, was that the status quo exists for a reason. People like the system they have. Everyone in a system, no matter how broken it is. And we see this in the United States today. We see it everywhere. And so the way kerosene worked is you had mafias that controlled the price and who got it. And everyone knew how to get it. You could get it every day. If you didn't pay, maybe they'd give you a buy for the day. But even though it was killing you and providing very low quality, you understood it. You knew the players, even if they were ripping you off. It worked. So you had to beat all that. And as it became clear that people were really liking the solar thing, the kerosene mafias started to come after the company. And they would take the D-lights off the shelves and they would convince people that they were going to break. So we didn't understand all the friction that you have to overcome to build a market at the beginning. Now we do. And also you start to see adjacencies. And what's so exciting when you're looking at early market development for low-income people, who frankly the world has never cared that much about, is that different entrepreneurial participants start coming together, not necessarily in a concerted effort, but ultimately what turns out to be a collective effort. So D-Light starts 2007. They're moving along. They're learning a lot. 2011, 12, M-Pesa, which is the first mobile money in the world.
Huge advancement.
Huge advancement because now it partners with cell phones. Now you can pay on a daily basis for your light, just like you used to pay electricity. And if you don't pay your loan by the end of the month, the company can shut you down, your unit down, or they can call you and say, just like the moneylenders did, and say, hey, what's going on? And if you build enough of a track record, maybe they'll give you 5 days grace.
Yep.
So now you're looking at real change. And then, Grant, it's a longer story, but then I really started to understand the adjacent possible. You start with light. You build that. People they start to develop a track record and a credit habit. Now they're paying every day. They pay off their unit. Now they want a smartphone. Now they want a television. Now they want a cook stove, a stove that doesn't require as much kerosene. And before you know it, all these adjacencies allow for real market development and rural distribution and, frankly, infinite possibility. And so one of our more recent investments is in a company called Ampersand, which is one of the first e-mobility companies. These incredibly cool motorcycles that are fully electric, and you drive up to what used to be a gas station and now is a battery swapping station, and in
Love
2
it.
minutes. All of that was accelerated because these very intrepid social entrepreneurs decided 17 years ago to go where others didn't dare to go, take a risk, not get out of the game, listen deeply to what their customers cared about, and cared about their customers, so they actually were listening and not imposing what they thought the answer should be.
Yep.
And now we have 40 companies in off-grid solar across the whole ecosystem. And together they've brought light and electricity to more than 300 million low-income people across the planet.
Incredible. I'm going to go off track a little bit here. So I talked to Andy Cooper of Leapfrog Investments, and he had
he's great.
He great, and he had a similar story. Whether it's Leapfrog, Acumen, and there are some others. Are they heavy cross investments? I say that because it seems like there's so many people that know what to do, and now it's just almost access to capital to kind of go and get it done and invest in these entrepreneurs that know the problems. You guys know the problems as well. There seems to be maybe a chance where now we start to see an infusion of traditional capital markets coming into parts of the world that, like you said, maybe were not investable before. But now with the advent of smartphones, you have these markets that Acumen has helped build. It has sort of made the way now for that next stage of entrepreneurs and markets to keep growing. Do you see traditional capital coming in wanting to invest in these areas now that you and others have actually built the market and made it investable? No, that's a long question, but
No, it's a really important question because I wish the answer were a defiant yes. But unfortunately, the answer is not enough.
Okay. Why do you think that is?
Because traditional investors, they only like risk if they have a really strong certainty that there will be a corollary reward. And when you look at Africa as a region, for instance, particularly over the last few years, they've had incredibly powerful economic headwinds. So not only do you have to be a great entrepreneur and really know how to build companies, but you have to fight currency devaluation. Nigeria's had 70% currency devaluation. This year, 100%. High inflation. The climate change stuff is real. So you go from drought to flood to locust infestation. Like, you can't make it up. And so I think we have to reframe. I'm glad you like words. I think we have to reframe and create new narratives about what is risk and what is real and strong investing, because we don't see enough courage, which is what is needed more than anything else right now. We all talk about urgency. We all talk about the need for self-determination, local entrepreneurs. We want countries to be stable. And to your point, we have the entrepreneurs, we have the tools, we know the kind of capital that is needed. And too many people, especially investors, are still standing on the sidelines, waiting to see when might it be time to be safe. And if you're looking for safe, stay within 40 miles of Silicon Valley and keep doing things that are good for really wealthy people. But it's not safe to have a world that is as unequal, divided, and fragile as our world is today. And so I think we have to have a more holistic look at what risk, what safe, and what investing mean and could mean for the world.
I want to touch on the academy real quick and the thousands of social entrepreneurs that have been trained through that. What are some maybe the common qualities that you see most of these entrepreneurs sort of have?
Another great question, Grant. What binds all entrepreneurs, and when one of Acumen's star entrepreneurs meet an entrepreneur anywhere doing anything in the world, they recognize each other because they're a little crazy. They have these dreams of what the world could be, and they're not afraid to go after it. I would say the single most important quality that is a through line for great entrepreneurs is determination, resilience, grit, no matter what you're trying to do. What separates the truly successful social entrepreneurs is three things. One is what I would call the moral imagination. So they can see the world that they want to build, but they have a humility to understand the world around them. They aren't just trying to impose what they think the world needs. They are incredible listeners. They are curious, and they can see the ugly. They don't run away from it. And so the moral imagination, that the humility to see the world as it is and the audacity to imagine what it could be, is the number one separator. Then number two is they have a deep ability to hold opposing ideas in tension, not just purpose and profit, that's hard enough, but the hard and the soft. Build housing for the first time, the first affordable housing community in Pakistan. And people think you might be just either you're a well-intended nonprofit or you're a fly-by-night loan shark. And so people test you. What if I don't pay? Are you going to throw me out? I'm poor. That's not going to look very good. And so you have to have the courage to at least threaten to evict people until they realize you are serious and they better be serious too. Yeah. And I've watched many entrepreneurs go through this. I sometimes think it's the risk of over empathy when working in very, very poor communities. It's understandable. The effective ones hold that mission and that desire to make things work without cruelty and without stupidity. And that's a really holding opposing ideas in tension. And the third I really already said, which is the deep listening skills, which I think all of us need more of right now. But the really effective social entrepreneurs have to listen to the very low income people they're trying to serve. Ultimately, and you mentioned this early on, to scale, they either are going to have to scale with government, which is mostly, or they are going to have to find alternative financial instruments like carbon credits. Now you're listening at a different level. It's a different kind of sophistication, but you have to be able to code switch and partner on both sides of the equation. A great example of I think it's one of the best social entrepreneurs in the world is a guy. It's actually two of them, Joe Shields and Dave Ellis, who, again, very young. You have to have a little crazy and youth for some of these things. There was no chicken industry in Ethiopia, none. When they decided that they would go after a government tender for $100,000 to start a chicken farm, they had no idea what they were doing, but they really had these skills of moral imagination, listening. Dave became completely fluent in Tigray, which is the language of, and Amharic, I think, of Ethiopia. And they lived in Tigray. They just immersed. They understood. They built trust.
Amazing.
As Dave said, I figured that if you come in and you act like a local, you act like a guest, over time they'll treat you like a local. And they did. And they also understood that they had to flip the traditional model of chickens because, and I still see this all around the world, well-intended governments or aid agencies want to give all these smallholder farmers lots of chickens, and then they can raise them, and then they'll have protein and they'll have things they can sell.
Yep.
Always fails. It's not easy to raise a chicken from day 1 day old to egg laying. So they said, all right, how do we take that work away from the farmer? What's government good at? Well, people trust government in the rural areas in Ethiopia. They can be the people that are out there in the field, helping people understand. And then we can build the company and create a series of agents so that we can sell 1,000 little chicks to an agent at a time. They can do all the work to raise the chickens. At 60 days, they can sell in batches of 2 or 3 to these farmers who on average make $2 a day. And this year they sold to 16,000 agents who sold chickens to 4.5 million farmers.
Wow.
Who produced and sold 6 billion eggs. And the company's injected far over $1 billion into these rural markets. And you're seeing malnutrition go down, protein go up, income increase by at least 20% at the household level, and a whole
The
industry.
domino effects are amazing, huh?
Market creation.
Yep. How long did that take, would you say? A decade?
Yes.
Almost? Yeah.
A decade. Now they're in 6 countries, and they're going to go to 10.
You mentioned another keyword here, and that's government. And that is obviously something investors have to deal with, entrepreneurs have to deal with, the community has to deal with. I guess maybe from a entrepreneur's point of view, what are some maybe the lessons learned? And you mentioned a couple already of how entrepreneurs should deal with governments, should work with them, should help them. How do they interact with them? Perhaps, and obviously different regions are completely different. But are there some key similarities of working with governments in these regions that can empower entrepreneurs and their businesses to be more successful? Is there sort of a systematic approach to working with governments and sort of emerging economies to get things done appropriately and to have this impact, right? You said a decade, like that's what it takes. So entrepreneurs need to understand, you're going to dedicate 10 years of your life to really change a generation.
Don't tell me you think you're going to do this for 2 or 3 years and then sell it.
Yep.
But I used to sound like you. Entrepreneurs got to deal with it. That is how I started thinking at Acumen. We'll just go under the radar. We'll get a business model. We'll show that it works. And then at some point, we'll go to government. There's still sometimes in some places real truth to doing that model. In many places, the scaling play is the government because you're developing products that very low income people can't afford. And that brings you to the philosophy of, if you can't afford quality education, does that mean you should only get terrible education? Most of us would say, well, no, if you want to build a society, you want kids to have at least acceptable levels of education. So we have a company in Pakistan called Talimabad, an amazing Acumen fellow from the academy, Harun Yassin. And he started as an 18-year-old with seeing street kids and thinking, how do I teach these kids? And over time, he started to play with other technologies and thought, what if I build an app that can provide ed tech lessons to young people? And then saw that in rural areas with illiterate parents, it wasn't enough. And so he started a series of physical schools so that teachers could make use of the technology and the teaching. During COVID, they now had to figure out a new system because there was lockdown all over the country. And so we had other fellows that worked in government. And we had another fellow that worked in cartoons and television. Those fellows got together, they collaborated, they thought about new ways of doing business models and what the government could do. And by the end of COVID, Talimabad was reaching 10, 12 million kids a day.
Wow.
Enabled and empowered by the government. And so now he has a company that has trained 600,000 young people across the country. Government has empowered this whole public television station to reinforce and expand that teaching. And when he thinks about his exit plan, it's to give Talimabad to the government as is critical to public education. And we saw the same with health tech, where we have an amazing, also Pakistani entrepreneur who built an app thinking it was going to be secondary or tertiary in the way you would deliver rural women high quality health care, because you have all these incredibly well-trained, very successful women doctors, but after they have a baby, most of them stop working. And so she was going to give them time to work from home on their computers with this app, but she was going to build out these clinics. And she built 26 of them. It really worked. It was small. COVID came. Government needed to figure out what to do to reach the rural people. And Sarah, her name is Sarah Said Kuram, she came forth with her model. And now not only is Sehet Kahani part of the government's health service, but she sits on the policy committees to look at integrating health tech into the delivery of health services in that country. So I have really moved from you got to deal with it to where are the entrepreneurial leaders inside government that have the character, that see what you have to offer and want to make change. In the United States, Grant, it's actually part of Acumen America's strategy.
I love it.
Acumen America's created an alliance of 11 of the most innovative Medicaid officers who really are interested in what social entrepreneurs are doing to take on the opioid epidemic, bring healthy food into
mental health services,
criminal record expungement.
Yes, yeah.
And what excites me about criminal record expungement is that 1 in 3 Americans have something on their record. 1 in 3.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're poor, it's really hard to get. You don't have the money to get these little infractions off. So you can't get a job and you can't get an apartment. Fascinating about Rasa, this company, is the first 2 states that partnered with them, which has made this an important company, are Arizona and Utah, red states. So what excites me about this moment in history for the social entrepreneurs is that social entrepreneurs want to solve problems. They are not obsessed with these ideological divides. And
great point.
In solving problems, they're showing us what's possible. And I think part of what is getting in our way as human beings, certainly in the United States, but I see it in country after country, is our collective lack of moral imagination, our collective belief almost in each other, that human beings have so much capacity to solve our problems individually and collectively if we change our mindset and start by focusing on what problem do we want to solve? What are the right business models to do it? Where does the market work and where is it limited? And then if we use investment as a means, rather than thinking of it as the end in and of itself, that the purpose of money is not just to make money. The purpose of money is to make beauty and effectiveness and release human energy. And I think that's the world we all want. And we're somehow forgetting it. And it's why I think the social entrepreneurs are the superpowers, are the superheroes of our day. And it's why people like you, who are making it your business to celebrate those individuals, are so important. Because I want every young person to think, I could maybe, if I try hard enough and I get smart enough and I get tough enough, maybe I can be like those people.
I wanted to touch on a couple quick questions. Two questions before we end here. One would be, we talked a little bit about traditional markets, traditional capital markets, Wall Street, finance in general. And then we have this sort of nonprofit arena that, kind of does the on the ground work and you kind of mentioned it and I thought it was excellent when you said that you had to go basically figure out how to build markets. And the question I have is there a place where institutions, specifically maybe, colleges, can play a role in creating curriculum and not have the separation of finance degree, business degree, and then a whole different cohort of people? You have a nonprofit degree, a public health degree. They're sort of separated and they're segmented and they are different sort of types of people. But if you bring those mentalities and philosophies together, to me, that's where the magic happens. And that's where a lot of the success I think Acumen has had and others has had is bringing those cohorts, those talented people from those sides of the aisle, let's say, bring them together and have them merge those ideologies in some way. Then that creates this sort of mentality, a new mentality, like you said, of how do you use capital? Yes, to make money. That will happen when you provide a good product for people, when you build markets where there aren't any. These things money will naturally get made and that will happen. But we've seemed to segregate those two amazing talents, whether it's in colleges, whether it's in the business world. And it seems like I'm optimistic because it does seem like I've talked to a lot of people that have been talented that are coming from Wall Street. Maybe they're retired or maybe they want to change in their career path, coming to join a social impact company or maybe a nonprofit. So I do see talent kind of coming into the space, but I was wondering, is there a place for institutions to develop some sort of MBA program around this sort of mentality?
Yeah, and I do think that is where I feel very hopeful right now as well. that we're starting to see, particularly at the business schools, not only more courses on social entrepreneurship, but more degrees on social entrepreneurship and impact investing. And there's a hunger. I think one of the most, if not the most, sought after class at Harvard Business School is Rebecca Henderson's class on reimagining capitalism. And Acumen Academy, we are now increasing the number of courses we're putting online to teach social entrepreneurs how to do this work. And part of that, I think, has to be as well how to find each other. And social entrepreneurs want to learn from people who are dealing with the same kinds of issues that they're dealing with. So the more we can get people who've done it to teach it, I think the more credible the whole thing will be. But absolutely, I think there's a hunger for it. And I think institutions know that this is where they are and want to lean into.
Last question I'll have, and I know it's always tough because there's so many dynamics, but is just about the future. And you've obviously done and accomplished so much, but maybe what do the next 5 to 10 years look like, either for Acumen, for you personally? What are some of the goals and successes maybe you would like to achieve, and maybe Acumen itself would like to achieve?
That's a big question. In 3 months after 3 months during which we've seen the end of USAID and tariffs and a very upside down global economy. I just met with 40 members of my East and West Africa teams, and hearing them talk, Grant, about what it feels like to be African right now, where so much of the world is turning their backs. For me, relit the fire. What does it mean to stand with each other? And what does it mean to do even more to enable greater self-sufficiency and innovation? So when I think about Acumen and myself, but even more Acumen, I feel like we have heavy headwinds right now. Every single individual and institution who is focused on change is fooling themselves if they're not acknowledging the world that is, which has heavy economic and political headwinds. On the other hand, I feel there is so much extraordinary opportunity, and that if we stay focused on seeing the problems in front of us as great opportunities to solve, we will do just that. So I look at Acumen's future as becoming even more creative, more courageous in seeing problems that we want to solve, and then crafting the right capital solutions and finding the right entrepreneurs with the strongest character to show the world what's possible. We didn't get to talk about the work we did with bringing off-grid electricity to the most vulnerable 75 million people across 16 countries in Africa. Those countries include places like South Sudan and Somalia and Benin and Burkina Faso and Zambia and Malawi, Togo, places where we too often hear bad news, but where there's young people just wanting to be part of something bigger and ready to do what it takes. This is not the realm of just build an investment fund for traditional LPs. But if you have the courage to say, here's where we need grant funding, to not to give away money, but to put those long-term, early-stage patient capital investments in so you can start to build markets that have never existed before. Here's where you need concessionary debt. So that once those companies are in country, they have an incentive to stay. And then we have money so that we can have an impact kicker, if you will. So
this is your next book, Impact Capital Stack. How
Impact
to do
Capital
this.
Stack, baby. This is Acumen's next chapter. Be fearless about the way we stack that capital. Be grounded and determined in only working with those entrepreneurs who have the character to go the distance. And be full of what we would call a hard-edged hope, because this is possible. And 650 million people in, I believe it with every bone in my body. And that it is in these difficult times that we actually find the best versions of ourselves, if we don't give in to all the swirl and the noise around us, but instead recognize there are people all over the world who want to build a world that we, our children and their children, can thrive in.
I had so many other questions. I wish we had
Grant, I'm
more
so
time.
sorry. I just answered for too long.
No, listen, this is amazing. Like, It's so perfect. I can't thank you enough for taking the time. Hopefully, maybe we could do this again, and when you write the next book, and we'll do something else. That'd be cool. But again, thank you so much for your life's work and your ability to keep moving and keep fighting and keep building. I think you've had done so many things and had a tremendous life, and thank you so much for everything you've done, and you've inspired so many people, and I can't wait until the next generation build stuff based on the Acumen philosophy and all the training that's being done. I think it's building something that will last beyond your years is the dream. And I think you have done that in the most successful way. So congrats on everything you've done so far, and best of luck to you and the team for the next decade.
Grant, thank you so much. And thank you for ending in such a beautiful way. As someone who is seeing too much loss all around me, you are reminding not just me, but every single listener who comes to hear the amazing work you do, that that's the gift. That is the dream, that we don't want to just be left remembered for the amount of money we made, but it's the people we touch, the experiences we share, the ideas that get transferred. And if all of us could focus on that, I think we'd have so much more meaning individually and collectively. And so keep on doing the work you do. It's so important. And I've really been touched by the conversation. So thank you.